So in this tutorial, we are going to go over how we can kind of animate materials. This can be useful when you want to animate something specific to the material instead of the geometry. So if you go to shading, I already just created or add some simple texture that just have this little part on the texture, just to kind of show off what different things that you can animate and how you can work with them. But you can use any texture, anything. This is just kind of to show some things. So first thing what we can do to animate things is just right click on any of the variables. So if I want, let's say, metallic to be animated, I can just right click and insert keyframe. Now we also want to visualize our timeline, so let's pick one of the windows and go to dope sheet. And in here, if we try to insert keyframe, we see it here. If you don't see it, you probably have this button clicked, so only showing selected. We want to disable that. And now if you go to material, we can see we have that keyframe. If I go anywhere else, change this key and then insert it again, we can see now our setting is changing over time. And this is exactly what we want to achieve. So let's say you have a texture that is like this, and you want it to move the UVs in some direction. What you can do is type mapping and then add coordinate, texture coordinate, and this is all with Shift A, by the way, same as you would add any object in here. And now that you have this, if you just connect mapping to here, you can see that texture is not working properly. But if we connect UVs to the vector, we can see that now it looks the same as it did before, but we have all of these controls. So if I try to move it on the X, if I try to move it on the Y, and on the Z, we can kind of work with it. I don't think we can do Z because we have X and Y, but we can do it here. So let's set it to 0 and let's keyframe this. I can right click, insert keyframes, move it a bit, insert keyframes, and now actually I should have changed the value first, so maybe 0.5, and then replace keyframes, so you have different options depending if you have a keyframe or not. And now we can see what happens in those few frames. So this is basically how you can animate stuff and how you can combine things. So you can actually move the whole UVs, or you can move specific variables that just change some value like metallic or something like that. We can do the similar things with where is it? So if you have like brightness and contrast, we can add it in between, and each of these values is animatable. So I can change this, change the brightness, insert keyframe, and it's basically changing. And you can also go into shaders, and in here you can actually see the exact value that is changed and when. So if this is minimized, you are probably not sure what is animated where one variable starts and ends. But if you go to shader node tree, you can see exactly where each value changes. Now these windows are not set up the best, so this timeline would be the best to be at the bottom, and then you have this shader maybe in here, and then you have viewport in here, something like that might be nice. But for right now, I just reuse this part so we can nicely see. So in here we have principal BSDF metallic, so it says to you exactly which variable is changed in here. And here we have location XYZ. It says it's mapping node, so we know that it is some of the mapping nodes. Now it gets a bit complicated if you have like 5 mapping nodes and a big texture nodes, material node setup. But for this, it tells us pretty nicely kind of what is happening here. And I can also change its name in here, and we can see the name updates in here. So if you ever want to get more specific with mappings, you can actually rename them and get it named nicely in here. And you have your brightness contrast in here. And at any point, you can work like any other animation. You can change the distance in here, change some stuff. So you're not forced to kind of delete the keyframe, set it again, you can just move things around. And you can also disable if you don't want them to basically work, and it kind of sets it at the default value. So you would want to have it disabled wherever you want it to basically stop animating, I mean. So that's kind of the basic thing. You could also do some interesting things with shaders. So if you have a mix shader where you have two different shaders that you're using, so if you have a glass shader, might be hard to visualize. Let's do emission shader, and let's actually use this texture. So what I'm going to do is use this texture as a factor to basically choose which one we want to be glowing and which one we don't want to be glowing. So we can see how now we might need a bit of contrast in here. So I'm going to search brightness, contrast, add some contrast here. So we get a clear separation between black and white. And now if I change this value, only the value in here changes. So you could have a simple animation in here, maybe in strength to be, let's say, 10. If you try to render, we should see it bloom, okay. And with one we'll see no bloom. So the more we add, the more bloom we see. So maybe you want to create blinking motion, you could right click here, add a driver. This gets a bit more complicated. But if you remember in a previous tutorial, we talked about how you can add a driver, and that driver could be, let's say, noise. So we could create a random flickering for this over time. Or we could click insert keyframe, move it somewhere, set this to 1, let's say, insert keyframe, and then we get the glow effect. And we can also do this with color. So I can insert keyframe here for this color. At some point, maybe change it to this. And now we have the transition to the other color. Maybe to make it look better, we can do this. So it swaps from one color to another. So there is a bunch of things that you can do, especially when you start mixing stuff. You can also mix colors, you can mix textures, you can mix shaders. And keep in mind that you can also use drivers. Drivers can be really useful because you can automate some things like flickering lights or changing linearly over time, so you don't have to think about I started this animation from 0 to 100 frames, but my animation is now 200 frames. I have to go in and change some stuff to make it longer, stuff like that. You could just use the drivers to automate some animation that you basically want to use here.